Welcome to the Mentoring for Transformation podcast. I'm Robert Irvin, here with Herman Rica and Steve Irvin, International Director of MentorLink. On this podcast, we're all about going beyond just the theory and into the practical heart of biblical mentoring. Whether you're a seasoned ministry leader or just starting to invest in others, we're here to equip you with the tools and stories needed to shape both character and mission through mentorship. We have a great conversation lined up for you today that will help you understand the importance of mentorship for leaders. But because this is our first episode, we want to give you a little bit more context about us and MentorLink. Herman?
Hi, Robert, and thank you for having us. This is a first episode, and welcome everybody that is joining us for first time. And we're very happy to have you listening to us. And part of my role within the mentoring is being part of the global leadership team, and I get to see God using mentoring in so many contexts, nations, and it's so amazing to see the fruit of that. And we have seen also the greatest need worldwide is we need to see more mentors and leaders becoming more like Jesus. So Christ likeness is one of the main things that we're trying to pursue in MentorLink. And, thinking about this and also a couple of years ago, I heard a phrase that really got my attention is saying that the heart of mentoring is mentoring the heart. It's all about character development. Is all about Christ likeness. And thinking about that is we gathered a couple of months ago. We pray. We shared some ideas, and then we came with this plan of starting a podcast on talking about mentoring for transformation, because we have seen that, we have witnessed that, and that has been a great blessing. So we put together this podcast. And by the way, if this is your first time, take a couple of seconds, go to your app and hit the button follow so you can follow us for the upcoming episodes. We're planning to have a lot of great conversations, practical tools. So you as a mentor, mentee, or you want to know about mentoring, this is your spot. So hit the button follow. And today, as Robert just said, we are lining up a very great conversations. I would like to handle the mic to Steve so he can share a little bit more about what we have prepared for today. Steve?
Thanks, Herman. Yes, we're excited to have in our very first episode of Mentoring for Transformation, Doug Schmidt, who pastored churches, I think, Doug, for 33 years.
You're right.
And he's called in Bible colleges and seminaries, and then became the executive director of Barnabas Ministries International, Michigan, which is now changed its name to Pastor Thrive. So, Doug, just tell us a little bit about yourself and tell us about Pastor Thrive and what's going on.
Well, I'm married to my wife, Carolyn, for 52 years now. And we have 3 children, all grown, with 7 grandchildren. And they all live in the area, so we're very blessed. We just love getting together. They all love the Lord, and very, very thankful for that. Yeah, we took over Barnabas Ministries of Michigan several years ago. It was under the leadership of Dick Sochacki, who got upgraded to heaven, and his wife followed him just a few years later. And so we've operated under that name for many, many years. But as you know, there are probably dozens and dozens of Barnabas ministries. And so there's always confusion, and you always had to clarify, well, we're not related to any of the others. And we even get some checks from people from the 2 other Barnabas ministries that we had to forward it on. But no one ever forwarded any checks to us for some reason. In fact, one of my friends, I met him up in Bay Harbor, and we were talking, and he said, I love what you're doing through this ministry. He said, I'm going to have to change my will and put Barabbas in our in the estate plan. So I said, well,
man. Yeah.
let's work on spelling for that. But we love what we're doing, just mentoring pastors, mostly in Southeast Michigan, but around the country. And then basically doing, from the result of our Panama thing, we're mentoring pastors around the world too.
Wow. That's wonderful. That's wonderful. So, it's interesting. Barnabas in the New Testament is a mentor, right?
Yeah.
He's walking with Paul. He walks with John Mark. He's well, he's a model for us to follow. So, uh, I guess I'm curious, Doug, how did you get into mentoring? What was jump started you there?
It's interesting. My wife and I had a passion for ministry couples going back 30 some years. Um, and so we just started doing retreats for them. And then we always knew that when our pastoral days were over, we want to work with pastors somehow. And so we began to call on pastors and found out that what they needed most was mentoring. And so then we began to look at what that could look like and found MentorLink through Marvin Brubaker, found the materials and got permission to use them. We're very thankful for that, adjusted them a little bit with permission. And so we began to do mentoring in groups for a couple of reasons. One was to save time. Sure. And then secondly, to take advantage of peer mentoring. And so our groups normally are 4 to 6, 4 to 7 in a group, but some of them are as big as 20, 25. And in my opinion, that's too big. I lead 5 groups myself, but they're all average about 5 or 6.
Yeah, that's great. Doug, we've talked about before, and you spoke at the G Pro Congress in Panama back in 2023 about mentoring and mentoring of pastors. And really, I think one of the more significant uh, presentations there at the Congress. But we're living in days where pastors are falling left and right, falling like flies. In fact, just in recent days, a very prominent Christian author came out that had been in an adulterous relationship for 8 years, and then last year there was another very prominent U.S. Theologian and pastor and preacher. And I'm telling you, it's enough to discourage you. Why do you think pastors are falling?
That's a big question, and I don't think there's a singular answer. I think pastors fall for a number of reasons. Broadly speaking, it's pride, a pride that that is expressed through the old three, the big three: money, sex, and power. And so, some pastors fall morally. Working with 2 pastors right now that have lost their positions because they use church funds to pay personal bills, and they just got into a tough spot and did what they never thought they would do, but probably with full intention of paying it back before anybody found out. But it was discovered, and so power, money, sex are big reasons. I was with a pastor the other night, a good friend of mine, and we've known each other for 35 years. He pastors a very large church. He was experiencing what appeared to be the blessing of God in his church. The church was growing, multi-campus, and he fell morally 7 years ago. And we had dinner the other night. He was saying, Doug, when you meet with pastors, tell them that spiritual success plus exhaustion is very, very dangerous. And he was preaching 17 times a week. So he was just, kind of living on the fumes of what appeared to be spiritual success, but not taking his time off, probably cheating on his time with God, and fell, and he's been restored, and thankful for that. But I mean, we saw that with Elijah. It was Mount Carmel. And it doesn't get any better than that. I mean, one of the most dramatic stories of the Old Testament in First Kings chapter 18, where he takes on 400 uh, prophets of Baal and sees the power of God not only to consume the altar, but then the rain came. But then he runs, he runs ahead, and Jezebel wants to kill him, and he goes down to the desert, and in the desert he leaves his servant. He goes further from Beersheba, and finally ends up in Mount Horeb, Sinai, and there meets with God. God showed him, God provided for him the physical, the food, the rest, sleep, and then and spiritually said, "I've got work for you to do yet." And here, I want to anoint these kings, and Elisha's going to help you. And by the way, Elijah, you're not alone. I have 7,000 others. So that, to me, that those bookends of Mount Carmel, where he saw the great power of God, and Mount Horeb, where God revealed himself not in the none of the wind, none of the storm, but in the word there is silence, the whisper of God. And so I think pastors get in trouble when they don't take care of themselves spiritually, physically, emotionally, and they become very, very vulnerable.
So, what role do you think mentoring has in mitigating these issues for pastors?
I think mentoring plays a role because if they have a good mentoring relationship, that mentor will have permission to speak into a pastor's life. He's been there. He's walked in those shoes. Many pastors are isolated. They don't have anyone to talk to. And you and I, Steve, have talked before about the front stage and the backstage of ministry. And I think I mentioned that as well down in Panama. But Jimmy Dodd uses that metaphor in his book, Survive or Thrive. But he said we need three people for our front stage: a coach, a trainer, as well as a boss. But in the backstage, we need a friend with whom we can share anything and everything. And that friend, I think, obviously has to be the same gender. And I strongly prefer that friend to be outside of your present ministry. So there's no divided loyalty. There's no bias. Um, and there's confidentiality. And then you need a mentor. And that mentor, I love the definition that was just given. The heart of mentoring is mentoring the heart. And that's really what it is. Backstage, where coaching is in the front stage and is often contractual. Mentoring is the backstage, and it's deeper. It goes into the heart. Accountability, character development, as Herman said, Christ likeness. And so a mentor then can come alongside as a safe place for a pastor. So that pastor who feels so isolated always has a mentor that's a phone call away. And so I think that mentoring is really important in challenging, saying to a guy, "How's your prayer life? Are you into porn? Are you doing this? Are you doing that?" And to help keep them accountable. Obviously, though, that kind of transparency is only as good as honesty is real.
Exactly.
You have to be honest. But to answer your question, a lot of pastors just feel so isolated. They're alone. There's not a safe place. If they admit something, they may lose their job. So it's so they build up walls. I'm dealing with one pastor now who went on a website chat room, sent a picture that he shouldn't have sent. And as soon as he sent the picture, it was attached to his wife's Facebook account, and the extortion calls started coming. And he had no money. It was a horrible thing that he did. But he lost his job over it. His credentials were pulled by the denomination, and unfortunately lost his marriage. So it's and so it, if he would have had somebody he could just call on, he can't call his denominational hierarchy because there's conflict of interest, and he may lose his ministry there. So, and that he's only been trained to do one thing, and so he builds up walls, and instead of dealing with the sin, he tries to manage the consequences, and it doesn't work.
Yeah. Wow. That story is repeated over and over again, Doug. I've often commented that of all the pastors who burn out, fall out, whatever situation, and each situation is distinct. right? There's certain elements about it that are distinct, but they all have one. I think they all have one thing in common, and that is that they don't have anyone speaking into their lives. There's no one with whom they're vulnerable, right? And it leads me to believe that a man that walks alone, especially a pastor that walks alone, is he's walking on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. I use the metaphor. He's doing ministry without a parachute,
Mm.
and he's just
Wow.
he's an accident waiting to happen. The scriptures are pretty clear. Be sure your sin will find you out. That sin wasn't meant to be managed; it was meant to be confessed.
Yeah.
I didn't ask you this before, but I'm going to assume that you've had mentors in your life that have helped you to not walk alone in ministry and encouraged you. Uh, can you think of one in particular that stands out to you? You'd say, yeah, this guy really helped me.
Yeah, he did, and he's been a good friend. He was one of my seminary profs back in the last century, and he was just always been there. I worked for him for a while, but you watch people long enough, Steve, and then you find yourself in situations, and you subconsciously ask the question, like, what would Jerry do here?
Hmm.
How would Jerry handle this? So he mentored me without being in a formal mentoring relationship. We just got to know each other. I trusted him. I've asked him a lot of questions over the years related to family, marriage, and ministry. But so it was never, we never sat down and said, "Now, will you mentor me?" He just did, and I received it,
Yeah.
and um, so that was. I'm sure he's saved me from his mentoring, by his mentoring, from getting in all kinds of trouble. I still
Well,
got in
praise the Lord.
trouble.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah.
I want to invite Robert and Herman to jump in here. Uh, any comments
Sure.
or questions they may have. One thing that came up. Go ahead, Herman.
Yeah, no, I just want to say thank you, Doug, for everything that you just shared. And it is so real. I can relate with the isolation that so many pastors experience. And coming alongside with the isolation, I can see also the lack of investment in their inner life. It's kind of and I have seen that, and not only for pastors, but also for leaders in church. The only time that they spend time reading the Bible is because they're preparing a sermon, a class, or teaching something. And when you get the pressure to perform a teaching 2 times a week, or plus a sermon at the end of the week, and it's a lot. And then you find yourself spending more time preparing things for somebody else than spending time with the Lord and checking your heart. And I think that's what we can say the powerful of mentoring is you have someone that will bring to your life, will come to your life and ask this question: hey, how's your spiritual journey? What was the last thing that the Lord spoke to you? Not the last sermon series that you prepare on. It's what
Right.
the Lord spoke to your heart. What would be something that God appointed that you need to change? Or it's all these kind of questions. It's very deep and transformative. But again, it's for everybody. It's not only for pastors, but I've seen that more in the pastoral context. But I think it's you're coming at right on. Yeah, we need mentors in your life. I don't know, Robert, you want to add something or?
Yeah, I had the privilege to have several mentors when I was living in Kansas City, and one of them came up with this concept. Dan Sutherland came up with a concept called chair time, where he challenged you every day, spend 20 minutes in a chair, just being with the Lord, right? And the first question he would always ask, and I hated it, when something was going on, he said, how's your chair time? Oh, come on, Dan, I'm busy. I got all these things going on. And it was such a convicting question,
Yeah.
because you knew, how's your chair
Mm.
time? But Doug, I had a question. I'm a numbers guy. And so I was curious, what are we seeing? Like, do you have any information, any numbers, any, just to help us contextualize kind of the impact or the severity of this issue?
I think a great question, Robert. I think generally speaking, I think we all agree the work of the pastor is hard. It's very, very hard. Expectations are high. The commitment levels on our people are perhaps at an all-time low. And so, and it's the demands are just so great. So pastors, when we get the admonition from Scripture, they give attention to your teaching, front stage, and give attention to yourself, backstage. And it often happens that we manage the part that people can see. That's the front stage, and we often ignore or don't give as much attention. So, so statistics, they're changed, every time a new study comes out, and there are more studies. For a long time, we relied on studies that were in the 80s and the 90s, but it seems like new studies are coming out by one of three different groups every few months, or at least once a year. But one statistic was that 43% of pastors were discouraged and felt like quitting.
Wow.
A recent study has that dropped down to about 33%, which is encouraging, but still way too high. About a year ago, another study said that 25% of pastors admit to suffering from some mental illness. And it didn't specify which mental illness, but my hunch is it's related to discouragement and depression. So the futility rate is really high in ministry. I think for a lot of reasons, it's high. There's frustration. Um, the old statistic that I think is still accurate is that 50% of pastors who enter into the ministry won't make it for 5 years. 50% will fall out before their 5th anniversary. And out of every 10 who enter into career ministry, pastoral ministry, only one will retire from it. And so the statistics are high. And when I don't have any statistics with it as it relates to moral failure. I mean, the headlines tell us those. And, usually with the big names, and so many from the Dallas area over the last couple of years have fallen, and a lot of big names. But for every one of those big names, there are probably a multiple of unknowns whose lives have been torn apart, marriages torn apart, and churches suffer as a result of some kind of moral failure.
Yeah. Okay, well, Doug, I'm thinking we've got people listening, and we're talking about mentoring and even peer mentoring. What's your definition of mentoring?
Oh, I think if I'd known you were going to ask that, I'd come up with something brilliant, Steve. But
No, I don't. I want to know. I want to know from your heart, not from here.
I think it's mentoring is coming along somebody, pouring your life into them, and leading them towards Christ-likeness.
Wow, that's a great definition.
That's good.
And that involves so many things. It involves time investment, it involves honesty. When I tell the mentees in our group at our first meeting, we'll have a breakfast together, and I'll explain what it's going to look like once a month for 2 hours, and I'll say to them, I'll always be prepared. I promise you that. Number 2, I'll always be honest and transparent. Ask me anything, and they do. And number 3, I'll always be available and call anytime, and they do. Right. I think that's what mentoring is. It's that joining of, I want to say you're joined at the hip, but you're joined at the heart. And you're walking life in ministry with them, trying to, I think coaching is more of a transference of information, helping people raise their skill level, where mentoring is the transference of life.
Yeah.
The mentor I mentioned, a man named Jerry, I think his fingerprints are all over my life and all over my ministry because of his investment.
Yeah, life on life, much more than just cognitive transmission. knowledge and skills. That really sets mentoring apart. You mentioned something, Doug. You tell the guys you're working with they can ask you anything, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, and you don't have to. I want you. You obviously have to choose what you're gonna say here, but what's a question really put you on the spot? You said you're gonna be transparent. And they say, okay. Well, what's an example? I mean,
Well, let me answer that in maybe a little different way than what you were thinking. I think mentoring is a two-way street.
Hmm.
You can have a mentor in a room with 4 mentees, but the information then goes both ways. And not only the encouragement, and we hold each other accountable, but we spend the first 15 minutes of our 2-hour meeting just getting caught up from the last month. And I was just sharing, they'd all shared, and I was just sharing. I said, I had during this last month, I had cataract surgeries. And I was a little concerned about that. I said, I wasn't looking forward to it. It was one eye at a time, 1 week apart. And, you're dealing with your eyes. And so I thought I was very, very concerned. And one of the guys interrupted me, a pastor. He said, wait a minute. Isn't that something we should have known about?
Hmm.
And why didn't you share that? And I thought, I think I just got reprimanded.
Yeah.
But it was good. It was, and you have those moments all the time in a mentoring situation where it goes both ways, where guys are challenging each other, encouraging each other. No, we need to stop. I need to pray for you right now.
Hmm.
So those kind of things. But I think that, Steve, is the most recent one that stands out. Where just it wasn't a question; it was a rebuke.
It's a rebuke. Wow. Yeah, it's got to go both ways because as mentors, we want our mentees to be transparent with us,
Yeah.
but they will only be as transparent as we are with them.
Mm-hmm.
We've got
Mm-hmm.
we've got to kind of be the model in transparency, and yeah. So well, that's great. That's great.
Steve, I had another thought, Steve, with regards to moral failure. I think one of the things we could really do to help is set up moral fences,
Hmm.
guardrails for our lives and ministries.
Mhm.
I think one of the reasons we don't is pride. There isn't anything I can't handle, and no temptation is going to get to me. I think one of them is, and maybe that's wrapped around too. Jesus took risk with people. Uh, they usually use the story of the woman at the well, but we're not Jesus in that way. And in my theology, he didn't sin and he couldn't sin. That's not true with me. And so I think some moral fences that are just logical and rational. I've had these for years, and I've shared these with pastors. Things so simple like in your office door, make sure you have a window. You don't ride in a car with a woman who's not part of your family alone. Um, don't have a lunch with a woman who's not alone, part of your family. And I know in the marketplace that's impossible. The expectations just are there. It's a business lunch and all of that. But with ministry, we normally can hand off a counseling session to somebody else rather than deal with a woman alone. But I've shared those moral fences over the years and have been criticized by some by saying if you're like Jesus, you'll take risks. And um, I think I'm a risk taker, but not with my morality.
Mhm. That's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah, we should not tempt ourselves, should we?
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that.
and
There's
that's the pride. He that take heed. You think you stand, you're going to fall.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Robert. But
there's a book that I use when I'm mentoring young adults, college kids coming into manhood, if you will, called Play the Man. And there's one aspect that I really like about that book when he says, we tend to fall as men when we're stressed, exhausted and or tired, or we're bored. And so one of the things we always talk through is like, what are your trigger points? And 9 times out of 10, it's when you're stressed, when you're exhausted or tired, or you're bored. So I'm like, bro, if you're one of those 3, don't be alone, right? Don't lock yourself in a room if you know, right? So I think it's recognizing too those boundaries and those triggers that say, hey, if I'm in this type of a situation and I'm in this kind of mental state, maybe I'm going to call a buddy, or maybe I'm going to hit the gym instead of just hanging out or doing something different. But I really like that concept of the fences.
Robert, I've heard this. I can't give you the source. I don't know the source, but it's probably third-hand information. But the biggest time for pastors to use porn is Sunday night, where they've had a long week or weekend of ministry, and in their thought process, they rationalize that, say, I deserve it. I deserve it. I've worked so hard. And so, and they believe their own lies. I shouldn't say they. We believe our own lies.
Yeah, what would be the lie behind that, Doug?
Oh, that I can handle this, that I deserve it.
I deserve it. I think that's a big one. Yeah. And I've heard also nowadays. I think that's my personal conviction, and like my own fences. My wife had access to my phone, and she can go to whatever social media I am. And even I was talking with a pastor this past week, and he told me this: I'm not accepting any invitation on social media from a woman unless my wife check it and approve it. Because I don't trust myself. And I think that's the key that we're talking. We cannot trust ourselves because, Robert, when we are bored or stressed, we're going to just hit a wrong path, and we don't want to play with our morality. And, this is a very huge, important point where a mentor can speak into that and help us to build these fences and also to keep the fence very high so we don't fall.
And in a world of social media, right? And for younger leaders, clean your feed, right? That's what I'll tell people. Clean your feed. Let your wife look at your feed of the recommended videos. And I remember listening to a podcast actually separately, and they were saying, well, I get all this junk in my recommendations in my social media. Bro, it's a mirror. The algorithm is going off things that you're interested in, right? It's all off of data. So if your feed is not great, don't blame the technology. Take a step back and say, man, what type of things am I looking at? So that was a nice slap in the face too. Doug, as you have kind of this experience of mentorship with pastors, what are the early warning signs that you've seen in your experiences? And do you have any specific examples or stories around that?
Of moral failure, you mean, Robert? I think. Let me start by saying I think mentors have to be really good at asking questions, and I think we have to be really good at listening to what's said and also what's not said. I think we have to be really good at reading eyes and body language if we want to have the kind of relationship and communication that's going to reveal what's beneath the surface. And so I think some of the signs that I would look for would be exhaustion, overwork, and then you give me. Usually, I don't ask, "How's your quiet time?" I'll say something like, "What has God taught you recently in your quiet time?" And get them to articulate it, so it's not a yes or no answer. Things like that, and then sometimes you get indication from their wives or through their wives that something's not right, or they start missing meetings, that kind of thing. Um, yeah, those are the things I would look for. With our ministry, we try to do most of our work on the preventative side, by pouring into their lives, preparing them towards Christ likeness. Um, we do some restorative stuff, but it's longer, it's harder, and it oftentimes involves some expertise that I don't possess. Some professional counseling, some intensive work that may be done at a counseling center like Marble out in Colorado, or Ravines down in Indiana. There are a number of them, but to just look for signs of burnout, and maybe look for those signs that you mentioned, Robert, when they're bored, when they're exhausted, when they're stressed out. Mm-hmm.
I think you can tell a lot about a man in the way he prays.
Yeah.
When I say that, how he prays around others, because I don't
Mm-hmm.
obviously know how he prays
Mm-hmm.
privately, but in ministry, we get in the habit these perfunctory prayers
Yeah.
and these
Mm-hmm.
cliches that we may use in prayer. And I've been around guys, and supposedly they were praying to God, but I'm sure they were talking to me.
Yeah.
So it's I don't know nobody else may be in agreement with me on that, but that's been one of my experiences. Just
I think you're right. I think we all face that danger and catch ourselves at times,
Yeah,
praying for the group instead of to the Lord.
that's right.
Mm.
Doug, we've talked about peer mentoring a bit, and that's really where you've been focusing your ministry with pastors, pastor peer mentoring groups. Um, and we've talked about mentoring. So, okay, now I'm going to put you on the spot. You didn't come prepared. Now, what's peer mentoring?
Peer,
Yeah,
those are your colleagues. They're in ministries. They're in ministries other than your own. Um, I had 35 years ago, Steve. I had a thesis I wanted to try to prove, and because pastors go to conferences where it's a shot in the arm and a notebook, and you get home and put the notebook on the bottom shelf because that's the only place the big notebook will fit, and it's collected now, and then every few years you throw them all out. But it's a shot in the arm until the first bad board meeting, or the
mm,
first poison email that you get, or a nasty text. And I thought there's got to be something more that's going to help pastors be effective, be healthy, and be resilient for the long haul.
mm,
And my thesis was, I think it's based on the depth of relationships we have with colleagues outside of our ministry setting. So 35 years ago, we started doing retreats for pastors without really any itinerary. We played games. We worshiped together morning and evening. We beat each other up in the basketball court, and it was just. But what was happening is these guys were connecting, and after 3 days, they left the retreat, with 10 other guys on speed dial, and their wives, 10 wives on speed dial. So they always had these people. And so I think uh, the Lord seemed to indicate that there is validity in
mm,
that the depth of our relationships with colleagues outside of our ministry can be so, so helpful. Again, it depends on our openness, our honesty, um, to not do ministry alone, but to work with them. And we found that, these guys go hiking together. Sometimes they'll do vacations together. Their wives can connect, and it's just very, 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 very good. And they can say the hard things, like what are you doing? I remember asking a mentee that one time when he was, um, long story, but he he was making some decisions, that on the surface look bad. And I said to him once, I said, like, what are you doing? He said, what do you mean? Nothing's happening. I said, I'm not accusing you of anything. I said, this doesn't look good. And your wife needs the security that her husband is fully devoted to her. So that's, I think, what peer mentoring can do. I think peer mentoring in the area of confrontation may be stronger and more powerful than a mentor to mentee.
Yeah, we in MentorLink we talk about heart 1, 2, 3, and the mentoring heart, and where every Paul needs a Timothy, every Timothy needs a Paul, but every Paul also needs a Luke colleague to the side, a peer mentor. So, I think often we think of mentoring in a hierarchical relationship.
Yep.
The wise older mentor guiding the younger mentee, but those peer mentoring relationships can be powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I remember when my wife and I served in Colombia for 20 years, and there are lots of stress, obviously living cross culturally, but also in ministry. And I have a good friend, Howard Bidoff. We would meet every month. He was pastoring another church. He was of another mission, right? And I'm telling you, those monthly get-togethers with Howard. I don't know if they saved me, but boy, they sure helped me a whole lot getting through things.
Yeah. I think a lot of it comes down, Herman, you said this earlier, this relationship with our Lord Jesus, to spend time with him. When we skip those times of communion with him, Bible study, prayer, meditation, listening to a few songs on a Spotify list or something that where it can be so meaningful. And I shared with a group of pastors yesterday the concepts from John 15, where Jesus, I'm the vine, you're the branches. Without me, you can do nothing. But with me, you can do all things. That we have to constantly know that it's through His strength which works in us mightily. Um, and that's the only way we can approach a ministry, because what God has asked us to do, we can't pull off. We can't transform lives. We can't heal marriages. We can't. There's no silver bullet for addictions. It's Jesus. And so we're so totally dependent upon Him for all things. And that begins with our own walk with Him.
Robert, you've shared with me that you don't call it a constellation of mentors. I forget what the term is, but several people that you have in your life that you go to. What exactly is that? What does that look like?
Yeah, I call it Penta Sophia, right? So Penta mean 5, Sophia coming from wisdom. And the rule that I have, because I've made many mistakes, is if I have a major life decision, it could be spiritual, it could be financial, it could be professional, whatever it is. I go to 5 different people that's a mix of mentors who are older, wiser, more experienced, or as well as peer mentors. And I was just mentoring somebody this week. They have a major life decision to make, and told them about Penta Sophia. Don't just talk to me, because what I found is you get different flavors from, again, people with more experience. You get people kind of at your similar level that are looking at it from a different angle, and it's just a wealth of information. Proverbs talks about an abundance of counsel, and that was really where that thought for me came. So I always encourage people that I mentor, have more. You don't have to have one, and that it served me well, and I always encourage people, go to many. There's something to be
That-
said about that.
Good point. Yeah, because there is a danger in just having that one fountain of wisdom.
Yeah.
Whatever this guy says, this is from the Lord. Well, wait just a minute. Wait
Yeah.
just a minute.
In reality, though, don't we often, by human nature, look for the wisdom of somebody who's going to agree with us?
Oh, yeah.
So we may need all five before we can find one who'll agree with us. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's good.
I
That's a
often
great
tell people
advice.
the same thing, Robert. This didn't come from me, but I ask guys, who are the six? Who are the six guys that you've poured your life into, and they've poured their life into you?
Hmm.
That when your wife calls them one day and says, "I need you now,"
Mm.
they're going to come from anywhere in the world: Japan, Argentina, Britain, to carry your
Yeah.
task. So we have to have. I like the multiple, but I like that Penta Sophia. That's
Yeah.
that's really, really good.
All right. Well, we're kind of getting toward the end here, Doug. I wanted to. We're going to ask every person who comes on our podcast this question. So you get to break some ground here, but we've got people listening, hopefully, and hearing our first podcast. Just what would be your top practical advice? What would be your different counsels you would give to mentors? Okay,
To mentor,
yeah, I want you to talk to mentors, and you've mentioned some things in this conversation, but what would be your top 2 or 3 pieces of advice you'd want every mentor to know?
I think when I read the scripture, Steve, we need to invest in that which outlives us. I look at Hezekiah when God gave him 15 more years and he wasted them.
Hmm.
He did not invest in that which outlives us. That which is eternal is the word of God and people. And so we have the opportunity, I think, especially as we nearing the sage stage of life, to take what we have learned from others, from our own mistakes and from the Lord, and invest it with people. So it's for pastoring, it's pastors mentoring young pastors, and young pastors want it. They're looking for mentors, and we can provide that. And the way I looked at it when I was transitioning from the pastoral work to work of encouragement and mentoring, I asked the Lord. I said, Lord, would you allow me, almost like I remember Samson, where he made a mess of his life, but he gets to the end, and he said, Lord, let me do this and may accomplish more now in this moment than I did the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And I think with mentoring, when we're at this stage by 50s, mid 50s, all the way to as long as we have breath, we have the opportunity to multiply the effect of ministry as we pour into others. So that's what I would say to all mentors: make the investment, love people,
Yeah.
listen to them, encourage them, walk alongside them, celebrate them, speak truth to them, but do it all for the glory of God.
Amen. Thank you, Doug. Good word.
I have maybe a follow-up, just given the context of today's podcast. If there's somebody listening to this podcast and they're realizing maybe there's some early warning signs, they haven't fallen yet, what would you tell them?
I would say find that person that you can confide in, that's a safe person, and let them know, tell them, encourage prayer, encourage openness. Um, Obviously, spend the time with the Lord that you need to deal with the weakness that could lead to failure.
Thank you, Doug. We appreciate your time. Thanks for your ministry and pouring into people and pouring into us and our listeners. We really appreciate that.
It's a delight to be with you. Thank you.
Great. And so wherever you're listening from, we encourage you to subscribe to this podcast, follow MentorLink. We're on LinkedIn, on Instagram, on YouTube as well. And use MentorLink's free resources. If you go to mentorlink.org, you can download all free resources that hit on these topics of how to live and lead like Jesus. Thank you.